Over the past couple of decades, we've seen many superhero franchises come to an unfortunate demise on the big screen. From the DCEU to the Sony Spider-Man universe to Fox's X-Men universe, it seems like no one has been able to weather the storm like Disney's MCU. However, possibly the funniest and quickest death of a superhero franchise is found in 2015's Fant4stic 4, also known as Fant4stic. Unlike these other universes where they were cancelled after several installments, Fox's Fant4stic 4 reboot died before it even got a chance to get off the ground. It was a movie that was marred with issues all throughout production, was hit with abysmal reviews, and lost millions upon millions of dollars. So today, I want to revisit this fantastic failure, to explore all the problems that plagued its production, find out why it failed, and offer up some of my personal thoughts on the movie. The idea of rebooting the Fant4stic 4 on the big screen first arose back in 2009, just 2 years after the last iteration. Now, a third film in that series was considered, as all the main cast had signed on for 3 movies. Additionally, lots of story ideas were tossed around, such as more of a focus on Ben Grimm's relationship, introducing the character of Franklin Richards, and even introducing Black Panther. However, since the sequel grossed less than the first film, Fox was unsure of the series' future and never went forward with the script. In 2009, Fox announced that they would be rebooting the series with a new script written by Michael Green and Akiva Goldsman as a producer. Later in 2012, Jeremy Slater would come on to write a new draft of the script. A director was found with Josh Trank, who scored the gig after the success of his film, Chronicle. Trank would work alongside Slater on the script for a time, and earlier drafts included a lot more action and a lot more characters such as Herbie, Mole Man, and Galactus. As the screenplay began to take shape, Trank and Slater would clash over what they wanted the film to look like. Slater wanted to use the Avengers as a template for the story and tone. However, Trank was totally against this version of the film, wanting to make something grittier and grounded. Trank was more interested in exploring Reed's character development and tragic arc, while Slater wanted to focus on the more fantastical elements of the source material. These two could just not get on the same page with this film, and this is where the project first went wrong. Here's a quote from Polygon on this creative partnership. Slater estimated that he wrote nearly 18 drafts and 2,000 pages of material during this time on Fant4stic 4. Only 2 of those drafts made it to the studio. In an effort to retain control, Trank acted as the messenger between Fox and Slater, leaving certain studio notes out of their conversations, and only delivering certain drafts to the studio for feedback. Right from the start of the process, Josh told me I wasn't allowed to speak with Fox without him present, Slater said. I never saw 95% of those notes. As to be expected, Slater would leave the project after 6 months, and the studio brought in Simon Kinberg to work on the screenplay and hopefully steer the ship back in the right direction. But with a hard release date looming over their heads and production getting closer and closer each day, the working conditions were less than ideal. If you're wondering why Fox was so concerned about getting this into production as soon as possible, it's because if they didn't make a Fant4stic 4 film by a certain date, then the rights would revert back to Marvel. As for casting, many big names were in the running for each of these iconic characters. Trank always had Michael B. Jordan in mind for Johnny Storm, but for Reed Richards, Kit Harington, Richard Madden, and Jack O'Connell were all considered before Miles Teller scored the role. Apparently, the studio really didn't want Teller in the role, but Trank fought tooth and nail for him, which is ironic due to reasons we'll discuss later. Eddie Redmayne, Jack Houston, and Sam Riley were all in the running for Dr. Doom before Toby Kebbell was cast. Mads Mikkelsen also auditioned for the role, but he ended up walking out of his audition. For Sue Storm, Saoirse Ronan, Allison Williams, Emmy Rossum, and Margot Robbie all auditioned before the role ended up with Kate Mara. To prepare for her role, Kate Mara wanted to read some Fant4stic 4 comic books, but she was told not to because the film was an original story and not based on any particular source material. As for Ben Grimm, Fox originally wanted Josh Gad for the role, but luckily it ended up with Jamie Bell instead. In fact, one of the only upsides to this whole mess is Jamie Bell and Kate Mara met each other on set and would get married 2 years later. Despite all the problems with the script, the creative team pushed through and the film went into production in May of 2014. But the troubles for Fant4stic had only just begun. Fant4stic 4 was originally going to be shot in Vancouver, Canada. However, it was moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana due to the better tax incentives. Filming took place for 72 days between May and August, and the road was pretty rocky. Trank stated that before production took place, Fox slashed the budget by $30 million, taking out 3 major action sequences and cutting much of the spectacle-filled climax with the intention of filming it with a second round of shooting. and this original version was going to be closer to 2 hours and 20 minutes, rather than the hour and 40 minutes it ended up being. According to Entertainment Weekly, the working relationship between Trank and his lead actors was full of tension. Here's a quote. Josh Trank ended up almost fighting Teller, who has a reputation for sarcasm and recalcitrance while working. At one point, the conflict nearly became physical, with Trank and Teller chest to chest, daring each other to throw the first punch. Neither did. There are also rumors that Trank acted cold and cruel to Kate Mara on set, as he did not want her in the role of Sue Storm, but was overruled by Fox on that casting decision. To add insult to injury, there were also rumors about how Josh Trank would act extremely erratic and isolated while on set, and would sometimes show up drunk or high. But again, these are just rumors, so I cannot confirm or deny this actually happened. But the drama doesn't end there, as according to The Hollywood Reporter, while filming in Baton Rouge, Trank and his dogs allegedly caused more than $100,000 worth of damage to a house that they were renting there. To make matters worse for Trank, he began sleeping with a .38 special in his nightstand after receiving numerous death threats for his decision to cast Michael B. Jordan as Johnny Storm. Here's a quote from Trank. "I was so paranoid during that shoot. If someone came into my house, I would have ended their life. If you're in a headspace where people want to get you, you think, I'm going to defend myself." But the troubles didn't even end when the film wrapped production, as after a rough cut was shown to Fox studio heads, they hated it. And as we touched on earlier, they hadn't yet filmed the climax or the ending of the movie. Trank was pretty much cut out of the reshoot process, with Fox commissioning new script pages to be written that Trank never got to read. Trank also wrote pages himself, but these were ignored by the studio. Here's another quote from Polygon on this process. "It was like being castrated," he said of being on the set, which was overseen by Kinberg and producer Hutch Parker. "You're standing there and you're basically watching producers blocking out scenes 5 minutes ahead of when you get there, having editors hired by the studio deciding the sequence of shots that are going to construct whatever is going on and what it is that they need. And then, because they know you're being nice, they'll sort of be nice to you by saying, well, does that sound good? And you can say yes or no." This time, Trank said yes. He wanted to keep his job. During these reshoots, there were scheduling conflicts with a lot of the cast, so they could only shoot on weekends. Additionally, you can see Kate Mara wearing a pretty noticeable wig, and Miles Teller having facial hair that disappears and reappears between different shots. Trank eventually got the Directors Guild of America involved to ensure his rights were being recognized. Trank and the studio reached a deal where he would re-edit the movie while Fox worked on his own cut, and both versions would screen test for audiences. Fox would then bring on the editor behind Avatar and the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, Stephen Rivkin, to cobble together a cohesive picture with all the footage they filmed. And Rivkin became kind of the de facto director, as Trank was not allowed any creative input. Fant4stic was a movie that was quickly going off the rails and was only getting worse and worse. But again, Fox didn't want to pull the plug on the project because they wanted to maintain control over the rights. I think the canary in the coal mine for this project was the fact that Stan Lee declined to make a cameo in the film, which is all you need to know about this movie's quality. Anyways, let's discuss the reception of the film and some of the aftermath. Fant4stic 4 hit theaters on August 7th of 2015, debuting at number 2 in the box office behind Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation, grossing a total of $25 million. In the US, it went on to make $56 million, and overseas it made $111 million, for a total worldwide gross of $167 million. And unfortunately, this was not enough to turn a profit, as the film had a production budget of around $120 to $155 million, and that's not including the marketing, distribution, or the theater's cuts. The Hollywood Reporter estimated that the film lost somewhere between $80 to $100 million. This made it the second biggest box office bomb of 2015, only beaten out by Disney's Tomorrowland, which lost around $120 to $150 million. So it wasn't a financial success, but was it at least a hit with fans or critics?
No.
Fant4stic currently holds an abysmal 9% critic and 18% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, in addition to a 4.3 out of 10 on IMDb and a 1.3 out of 5 on Letterboxd. This movie was also nominated for several Golden Raspberry Awards, including Worst Screen Combo, Worst Screenplay, Worst Picture, Worst Director, and Worst Prequel, Remake, Spinoff, or Sequel. And it won the last 3 awards, so at least it achieved something. During the filming of this movie, Josh Trank was hired by Lucasfilm to direct a Boba Fett movie. However, after Fant4stic hit theaters, he left the project. As Trank put it, he decided to quit before he was fired. Before 2015's Fantastic Four even began production, Fox announced a sequel which would hit theaters in 2017. However, after the negative reviews, terrible box office, and poor home media sales, this sequel was thrown into question. But despite the entire world telling them no, Fox went ahead anyways. Simon Kinberg was brought back to write this second movie, and in May of 2016, he expressed his intent to make it with the same cast. However, in the months following, Toby Kebbell, Kate Mara, and Miles Teller all stated that they were not interested in returning to the roles. Kingsman and X-Men First Class director, Matthew Vaughn, then expressed interest at taking another crack at the story to make up for the 2015 film, which he was a producer on. Oddly enough, the mastermind behind The Room, Tommy Wiseau, stated that he was a big fan of the movie, and he would love the chance to direct a sequel. I think this is my biggest what if in Hollywood. I would kill to see a Tommy Wiseau directed Fant4stic sequel. That would have been something special. Concept artist Alexander Lozano revealed that Trank's iteration of the Fantastic Four were considered for cameos in Tim Miller's take on Deadpool 2, but unfortunately, these cameos never came to fruition. However, once Disney acquired 21st Century Fox in 2017, talks of a direct sequel were put to rest, and Disney have now integrated a new rendition of the team into the MCU. And luckily, the new Fantastic Four movie has been received a lot better than the 2015 version. I mean, say what you will about the MCU, but at least the property is in much safer hands now. So now that we know the troubled history behind Fant4stic, let's dive into the many reasons why it failed, both commercially, but also just as a movie. There are many reasons why Fant4stic flopped, and some big ones we've already touched on. Obviously, the biggest reason being the terrible reviews and word of mouth from both critics, fans, and general audiences, which made lots of people hesitant to check the movie out in theaters. And Fox knew this would happen too, as they didn't lift the review embargo until 7 p.m. on Thursday, which was the same time as the first showings. I remember when this movie came out, lots of people were heralding it as one of the worst comic book movies of all time. And then there's also the costly reshoots, which caused the budget to swell and made profitability unlikely. On top of that, all the on-set drama was giving the movie bad press and gave the whole project the stamp as a failure before it even came out. In fact, the same day that the movie debuted in theaters, Josh Trank went on his Twitter to trash the movie, saying this: "A year ago, I had a fantastic version of this, and it would have received great reviews. You'll probably never see it. That's reality, though." Fantastic version, you say?
Say that again?
While Trank would quickly delete this tweet, the damage was done, and this little maneuver was estimated to cost Fox $10 million. I mean, when a movie's director comes out and says that the movie is trash, that tells the audience all they need to know about if they should see it or not. I will say, usually bad marketing is a big contributing factor for these box office bombs, but the first trailer for this movie was actually pretty solid. Even though half the footage wasn't in the actual movie, it still looked like an interesting new take on the characters and promised a more serious tone from the previous films, which leads into my next point. We have to consider that the Fantastic Four brand didn't have the greatest reputation within the cultural zeitgeist in 2015. Both the 2005 film and its 2007 sequel got pretty negative reviews and didn't do the most amazing numbers at the box office. I mean, they were decent numbers, but not fantastic.
Say that again?
This new reboot was Fox's chance to reintroduce the characters and regain public favor with a new gritty take on the source material after the cartoony version didn't land with audiences. It's a very similar situation to how Batman Begins revitalized the property after the damage that the Joel Schumacher Batman movies did. But unlike Batman Begins, Fant4stic was terrible. There were also quite a few deviations from the source material, which upset longtime fans of the comics. I think the most egregious one is Dr. Doom, who is such an iconic and interesting character, and one that the movie totally butchered. The fact that this movie treated its characters with such little respect caused a section of the intended fan base to write the film off and not support it monetarily. The fact that the MCU was still going strong in 2015 and so many comparisons were being made to why those movies succeeded made matters worse. The movie was also facing some competition at the box office with Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, which was a huge financial and critical success. And this all culminated in the movie losing $80 to $100 million. So now that we've discussed some reasons why this movie failed commercially, let me break down my personal thoughts on why it fails as a movie. Honestly, Fant4stic isn't nearly as bad as I thought it would be. Don't get me wrong, it's still horrible, but given the reviews, I thought I was in store for another Artemis Fowl or Jonah Hex. But there were actually a handful of things I liked about this film and a few scenes that I enjoyed. Let me highlight these aspects first before I get into the bad, because most of the film is pretty bad. There's a few scenes in this movie which really lean into that horror aspect and fully go for a dark tone, which land pretty well. The moment when they teleport back from the other dimension and Reed is crawling on the ground to reach Ben was really intense and effective. And the following scenes with the characters in the rooms being operated on really leaned into that body horror aspect that you could tell the filmmakers wanted to go further with. And that scene with Doom walking through the facility blowing up people's heads was surprisingly gory for a PG-13 movie and was pretty cool. The cast was also a high point of the film. They managed to score some pretty phenomenal actors. It's just a shame the script was so insanely bad. You can see glimpses of solid performances peek through every once in a while, but they're never given the chance to truly flex their acting muscles or deliver well-written dialogue. As a whole, I think the first half of this movie is pretty decent. It actually takes the time to establish some of these characters and try and make you care about them, which I can respect. However, the way these scenes are tackled isn't the greatest, and it messes up the pacing of the film since the second half of the movie moves by so insanely fast. And I can pinpoint the exact moment where this film went off the rails. It is the 1-year time jump. The movie before and after this time jump seem like completely different films. It totally skips over the important part of superhero origin stories where the heroes actually learn how to use their powers, and it fast tracks us past all the important character development. Reed and Ben have this falling out with each other, which should be an integral part of both their character arcs, but this all happens off screen during this time jump. And then, by the end of the movie, they're suddenly all cool with each other again, but we didn't even get a scene of them making up or anything. It is just so baffling how little regard this movie has for its characters, which leads into my next point. This movie just doesn't care about any character whose name isn't Reed Richards. Ben, Johnny, and Sue maybe get 1 or 2 scenes to help establish their characters and arcs in the first half of the movie, but after the time jump, they basically don't touch these characters ever again. However, the lack of development for these characters somehow pales in comparison to our main villain. This Dr. Doom is such a lousy villain because we barely get any time with him at all. He is introduced in the last 20 minutes of the movie, and then the filmmakers speedrun an entire movie's worth of material in this short window of time. In the span of 20 minutes, Doom is brought back to Earth, goes rogue, explains how and why he wants to destroy the world, goes back to the Rock universe, beats up the Fantastic Four a few times, and then is defeated. What was the logic behind introducing your main villain 3/4 of the way through your story? I get he was introduced early in the film, but he doesn't turn evil until the very end. This movie has the same problem that I had with 2017's Power Rangers, where our heroes don't get their iconic suit or powers until the end, so the entire movie just feels like a really long first act. If your movie is called The Fantastic Four, I want to see the Fantastic Four. The action in this movie is also so terrible it makes me physically nauseous. First off, there's barely any action at all, but the stuff we do get is so boring and uninspired. How are you going to take 4 characters with some of the most interesting powers in comics and give them the most boring blocking of all time? None of them use their powers in a unique way or have their hero moment. When fighting Doom, they do that annoying thing where they all take turns attacking him one at a time, and when that obviously doesn't work, they get the brilliant idea to work together to stop him. Their big plan to defeat Dr. Doom is to turn the Thing invisible and have him punch Doom into the third act Skybeam. That's it. That was super genius Reed Richards' big plan. It is so frustrating to watch because this guy is supposed to be one of the smartest characters in the Marvel Universe. And this is how he defeats another one of the smartest characters. He punches him into a Skybeam. I mean, foolproof plan, I guess, but it's just so lazy and stupid. And don't even get me started on the last scene in this movie. The group dynamic and chemistry is just so non-existent as they try to quip and joke with each other. But at least it gave us the Say That Again meme. Honestly, that meme being this film's entire legacy is deserved, because there's just not much substance here. Alright, I think I've said enough. Let's wrap it up. From battles between the director, actors, and studio, to budget cuts to reshoots, it's no wonder that 2015's Fantastic Four turned out to be the monster failure it was. It never launched the successful superhero franchise it was supposed to, and lost millions of dollars at the box office, along with being trashed by pretty much everyone who was unlucky enough to watch it. And that's the long and complicated history behind Fant4stic. But what are your thoughts on the movie? Do you think it's the worst comic book movie of all time, or are there other films out there that deserve that title? I'd love to know in the comments below. This has been Tom from Isenhart Productions, and thank you so much for watching. Also, thank you so much for 50,000 subscribers. I am eternally grateful to each and every one of you. I'll see you next week. And here's a clue of next week's video.
It's impossible. You're human.